Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sun Moon Audiobook, the channel where we share wisdom and inspiring book journeys to help you grow and develop your best self, inside and out. There's a quiet moment before dawn when the world feels as if it's holding its breath. The air is still, the sky is a muted gray, and the first shy hints of light begin to whisper their way across the horizon. It's in that fragile in-between neither night nor day that you can almost feel possibility brushing against your skin. Like maybe, just maybe, the life you've been aching for is out there, waiting, if only you could reach through the dimness and take it. That is where change begins, in that breath before the sun, in that pause between who you've been and who you could become. Stephen R. Covey understood this space well. He wasn't just a writer or a teacher, he was a guide, one who'd spent his life listening for the quiet truths beneath the noise. His work, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, has touched millions not because it hands out quick fixes or empty affirmations, but because it offers a kind of compass. It's not a set of rules meant to cage you, but a way of seeing the world that sets you free. Covey's voice is calm, wise, and deeply human, reminding you that effectiveness is not about squeezing more into your day, but about aligning the days you have with the life that matters. And so, we begin with the first habit: be proactive. It sounds simple, almost too obvious, but here is where most of us stumble. Being proactive is about owning your life not in the loud chest-thumping way of slogans and self-help posters, but in the quiet, consistent way of someone who refuses to be a victim of circumstance. It's the difference between waiting for the weather to change and learning how to plant seeds in every season. When you're reactive, life becomes a string of responses, each one shaped by someone else's words, moods, or decisions. When you're proactive, you see that there is a space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies your freedom. Imagine a storm raging outside, the rain relentless, the wind clawing at your windows. Being reactive is like pacing from room to room, wishing it would stop. Being proactive is lighting a fire, making a pot of tea, and using the time to read, write, or plan. The storm might still rage, but you are no longer at its mercy. The second habit flows from this. Begin with the end in mind. If being proactive is about taking ownership of your choices, beginning with the end in mind is about knowing where those choices are leading you. It's about holding a map in your hands before you start walking. Most people move through life like they're following a trail of breadcrumbs, reacting to whatever is in front of them, only to realize years later they've wandered far from where they wanted to be. Beginning with the end in mind means pausing long enough to picture your own funeral, not in a morbid way, but in a clarifying way. What would you want people to say about you? How would you want to be remembered? It strips away the noise and asks you to live in a way that your future self will thank you for. The third habit, put first things first, is where vision meets discipline. It's easy to say you know what matters. It's harder to build a life that reflects it. This habit is about placing the truly important things, relationships, health, growth above the merely urgent. Our days are full of urgent things: emails that demand answers, notifications that buzz, errands that feel pressing. But most of what is urgent is not important. And most of what is important never screams for your attention. It's like a garden, the weeds will shout at you, taking over in days if you let them. The roses will grow silently, requiring steady, patient care. Without this habit, even the clearest vision will wither. Then comes the fourth habit: think win-win. This is not about being endlessly agreeable or letting others have their way. It's about rejecting the scarcity mindset that says for me to win, you must lose. It's realizing that life is not a zero-sum game, and that trust, generosity, and collaboration create more value than competition and suspicion. It's the belief that we rise higher when we lift each other. This habit turns negotiation into partnership and relationships into alliances. The fifth habit, seek first to understand, then to be understood, is perhaps the most radical of all, because it asks you to slow down in a world that races towards speaking, posting, and proving. It's about listening with the intent to truly hear, not just to reply. When someone speaks, they're not just sharing words, they're handing you a piece of their inner world. To truly understand them is to hold that piece gently, without rushing to reshape it into your own image. And when you do speak, you'll find that your words carry more weight, because they're anchored in the respect you've already shown. The sixth habit, synergize, is where creativity and connection meet. It's about valuing differences, not just tolerating them, because it's in the blend of perspectives that innovation is born. Picture a choir, each voice with its own tone and texture. Alone, oh, they're fine. Together, they create something transcendent. Synergy is that harmony, not just in music, but in families, teams, and communities. And finally, the seventh habit, sharpen the saw. Imagine trying to cut down a tree with a dull blade. Every stroke takes more effort. Every movement feels heavier, and still the progress is slow. Sharpening the saw means renewing yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, so that your work is sustainable and your life is whole. It's the reminder that you are the instrument through which everything else happens, and neglecting yourself is the fastest way to lose everything you're working for. There's a tenderness in the idea of sharpening the saw because it's an act of both humility and wisdom. It's admitting that you are not an endless source of energy, that you need to pause, to step back, to breathe. It's also an acknowledgement that you are worthy of care, not just productivity. Too often we wear exhaustion like a badge of honor, as if being worn down is proof of our value. But Covey reminds us that the most effective people are not those who run themselves into the ground. They are those who sustain themselves so they can keep showing up with strength and clarity. And here's where the beauty of the 7 habits lies. They're not separate boxes to check, but a spiral, each feeding into the other. Being proactive feeds into beginning with the end in mind, which naturally flows into putting first things first. Thinking win-win becomes easier when you've built trust through understanding, and synergy grows when you've made space for renewal. It's a way of living that turns life from a constant reaction into an intentional creation. You, who are listening right now, might feel a flicker of resistance. Maybe you're thinking it's too late, that your patterns are too ingrained, or your circumstances too fixed. But here, this change is not an earthquake. It's not one massive shift that happens overnight. It's the slow turning of the soil, the quiet planting of seeds, the patient watering. You don't have to overhaul everything by tomorrow. You just have to begin. Maybe you start with being proactive, noticing the moments when you blame the weather, the boss, the economy, your upbringing, and asking, what can I do right now with what I have? Or maybe you begin with the end in mind, spending an hour imagining the kind of person you want to be when the years have carved their lines into your face. I remember once standing at a train station, watching a man miss his train. He didn't curse, didn't stomp, didn't check his phone in agitation. He simply sat down on the bench, pulled out a small notebook, and began to write. The train was gone. The moment was lost, but he claimed it anyway, turned it into something. That quiet reclaiming stayed with me, a living example of proactivity in the smallest, most human way. Covey's habits are not grand gestures, though they can lead to them. They are daily choices, often invisible to others, that shift the ground beneath your life. Think of win-win, for example. In business, leaders like Howard Schultz of Starbucks built entire cultures around it, creating not just profits, but opportunities for employees to grow, communities to benefit, and customers to feel valued. And in understanding first, then being understood, you'll find echoes in figures like Nelson Mandela, who knew that listening to his opponents was not weakness, but the first step toward building bridges across impossible divides. These habits are as much about who you are becoming as they are about what you are achieving. They strip away the illusion that success is about speed, noise, or busyness, and instead root it in clarity, alignment, and relationship. And somewhere in the middle of this journey, there's a pause, a moment where you might feel the tug of old habits, the comfort of the familiar. You might question whether all this effort is worth it, whether you're really capable of living differently. That's when you remember, the habits are not a demand for perfection, but an invitation to return, again and again. to the person you want to be. Every time you choose to respond instead of react, to listen instead of talk, to nurture instead of neglect, you are reshaping the arc of your life. And yes, it's possible, even now, especially now, because the life you want is not waiting at the end of some distant finish line, it's being built in the quiet choices of today. And as you carry these habits into your days, you start to notice a soft but profound shift. The frantic urgency that once chased you begins to fade, replaced by a steadier rhythm. Life stops feeling like a series of fires you have to put out and starts feeling like a garden you're tending. You become more deliberate, more grounded, more at peace with the pace of your own becoming. When you're proactive, you take the reins, no longer giving the power over your mood or your path to someone else's words, actions, or missteps. And when you begin with the end in mind, your calendar, your commitments, and even your casual choices start to align with something deeper than convenience or habit. They align with the story you actually want to live. Putting first things first becomes a kind of quiet rebellion against the world's noise. You stop letting every ping and pop-up dictate your attention, and you begin protecting time for the things that matter most. It might mean leaving work on time to have dinner with your family. It might mean setting aside the first hour of your morning for your health, your faith, or your craft. And you realize that saying yes to what matters often means saying no, gracefully, firmly, to what doesn't. Thinking win-win becomes a lens through which you approach relationships and opportunities. You stop seeing every encounter as a contest to be won and start looking for ways both sides can walk away richer, not just in money, but in trust, respect, and possibility. You learn that generosity isn't weakness and collaboration isn't compromise. Seeking first to understand, then to be understood, becomes more than a communication tool. It becomes an act of love. You see how much people ache to be heard, how starved they are for the kind of attention that isn't just waiting for a turn to speak. And when you truly hear someone, without judgment or rush, you create a rare and sacred space, one where truth feels safe enough to emerge. Synergizing becomes second nature when you begin to value difference not as a problem to solve, but as raw material for something better. You start looking at contrasting viewpoints the way a painter looks at colors not as opposites, but as possibilities for a richer canvas. In teams, families, and friendships, you find that blending strengths creates outcomes none of you could have shaped alone. And sharpening the saw becomes less about self-care trends and more about honoring the vessel that carries you through this life. You make space for rest not as an indulgence, but as preparation. You feed your mind with good books and nourishing conversations. You move your body not because you hate it, but because you cherish the life it holds. You tend to your spirit in whatever ways bring you back to center. Over time, these habits aren't just things you practice, they become part of you. You find yourself making better choices almost without thinking, handling challenges with more grace, and seeing opportunities where you once saw only obstacles. And when setbacks come, because they will, you have the resilience to adapt without losing yourself. This is the quiet magic of Covey's work. It doesn't just change what you do. It changes how you see. And in changing how you see, it changes everything. And now, as you sit with these ideas, maybe you feel a small sense of readiness to try. It doesn't have to be dramatic. You can begin in the smallest of ways. Pause before you react. Ask a better question. Protect a single hour for something that matters. One choice, repeated often, can transform the whole landscape of your life. The habits are not there to pressure you into an impossible standard. They are there to guide you, gently but persistently, toward a life of integrity, purpose, and peace. The kind of life that when you look back years from now will feel whole. And maybe that's the heart of it, wholeness. Not just success in a narrow sense, not just the pursuit of one shining achievement while the rest of your life frays at the edges, but the slow, deliberate weaving of a life that holds together under pressure. These 7 habits are like threads of different colors, each one essential, each one strengthening the fabric. When you're proactive, you choose your thread instead of letting someone else pick it for you. When you begin with the end in mind, You choose the pattern, the image you want your life to form. When you put first things first, you make sure the strongest threads are placed where they'll carry the most weight. When you think win-win, you weave with others instead of pulling the cloth apart. When you seek first to understand, then to be understood, you align the weave so that every strand supports the others. When you synergize, you create designs you couldn't have imagined alone. And when you sharpen the saw, you keep the loom in good repair, so the work can continue for a lifetime. But here's something: Covey never shies away from the truth that living these habits is not easy. The world will constantly pull you toward reaction, distraction, and short-term comfort. People will test your patience, and circumstances will test your resolve. And yet, it's in the moments of greatest challenge that these habits show their true power. Think of a leader faced with a crisis. The ones who keep their composure, rally their teams, and find a path forward are not those who panic or point fingers. They are those who have trained themselves over years to pause before they act, to see the bigger picture, to prioritize wisely, to build alliances instead of walls. These habits, practiced daily, become your instinct when the pressure mounts. You, who are listening now, might be wondering how this looks in your own life. The truth is, you don't have to overhaul everything all at once. You can start with one habit and let it ripple outward. Maybe tomorrow you choose proactivity by taking a deep breath before answering an email that frustrates you. Maybe next week you set aside time to map out where you want to be in 5 years. Over time, these choices compound, and you realize that the person you've become is no longer at the mercy of moods, impulses, or outside forces. And along the way, you may also notice how these habits affect not just you, but the people around you. Your calm inspires calm in others. Your focus helps others see what matters. Your willingness to listen makes others feel valued. And when they feel valued, they contribute more fully, creating a cycle of trust and cooperation that lifts everyone. That is the quiet revolution Covey invites us into, the kind that begins in the smallest of moments, but spreads far beyond them. The kind that doesn't just change your life, but can, over time, change the culture you move through. It's a reminder that leadership is not about titles or roles. It's about the influence you carry into every interaction. And when that influence is rooted in these habits, it becomes a force for good that is hard to measure but impossible to ignore. And as the days pass, the habits stop feeling like tasks you're trying to remember and start becoming the way you move through the world, like a second language you've grown fluent in. You start noticing how proactivity shifts the energy of a conversation before it turns tense. How beginning with the end in mind makes even small choices feel purposeful. How putting first things first leaves you with fewer regrets at the end of the day. Thinking win-win becomes not just a principle, but a kind of trust you carry into each interaction, a quiet confidence that there's a way forward that doesn't require anyone to lose. Seeking first to understand becomes a habit of slowing down. Even when your mind wants to rush, you stay with the moment long enough to truly hear. And the more you practice it, the more you realize how rare this is in a world that's constantly talking over itself. Synergy becomes a joyful discovery, a reminder that differences aren't just tolerable but essential for creating something better than you could have made alone. And sharpening the saw becomes a form of honoring your own life, the recognition that you are both the tool and the craftsman, and that caring for yourself is not selfish but necessary for any good work to last. There's something almost sacred about this process, because it is just about efficiency or productivity. It's about becoming the kind of person whose life is an integrated whole, whose choices, relationships, and work are aligned with their deepest values. And this kind of life, quietly but powerfully, touches everyone it encounters. Imagine for a moment the ripples you could create. Not by grand gestures, but by the consistent practice of these habits. A colleague who feels heard because you listened without judgment. A friend who feels supported because you sought a win-win when conflict arose. A child who learns what focus and discipline look like because you put first things first. These moments might feel small, almost invisible, but they accumulate into something undeniable. And perhaps the most profound part of Covey's message is that the power to live this way is already in your hands. No one can give it to you, And no one can take it away. It's in your choices, in the space between stimulus and response, in the vision you carry for your own life. And so, as we come to the close of this reflection, let me offer you this. Picture a seed. Small, unassuming, easy to overlook. You could leave it on a shelf for years and nothing would happen. But place it in soil, give it water and sunlight, and it will grow quietly, steadily, almost imperceptibly at first, until one day it becomes something strong enough to weather storms and offer shade. These habits are like that seed. They hold within them the possibility of a life you can be proud of, a life that feels whole. All they ask is that you plant them, tend them, and trust the process. If this spoke to you, if it stirred something inside you, a question, a memory, a quiet resolve, I'd love for you to carry it forward. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you've seen in your own life, or what you hope to see. Your voice matters here, not just for me, but for the others who will read and realize they're not alone in wanting something more. Because change isn't a solitary act, it's a ripple, and you might be the one who starts it.